look, y'all, I have an awful lot of criticisms of Senator Elissa Slotkin, but I got to give credit where credit is due. And her line of questioning of Ted Lyons the other day in the Senate hearing was just, mwah, it was masterful, right? She rightly was frustrated that Kristi Noem was not there answering questions. And so she was going to put those questions to Todd Lyons. And I'd like you to watch this clip of the hearing here, and in particular focus in on the exchange between Slotkin and Lyons when it comes to using federal agents, ICE agents, at polling places during elections.
Homeland Security coming in front of the American people, and certainly the Oversight Committee, when we have such existential issues about the deployment of federal force in our country going on. But you are here in her place. And I think, if we rewound the tape to a year and a half ago or a year plus ago, you had a lot of Americans who felt very strongly that if you are here illegally, especially if you were involved in any kind of criminal activity, you should be deported, right? You need strong borders. I'm a CIA officer. You need strong borders. We need an immigration policy that allows us to do that, but that enforcement would have been something that the average American supported. But the conduct of ICE in places like Minneapolis has now boomeranged to the point where people say, well, look, I was for enforcement, but I'm not for what looks like authoritarian style, federal goons on our streets.
It looks like,
and that's not coming from Democrats. That's coming from, in Michigan, the state of Michigan voted for Donald Trump. You're coming from people who say, look, I'm all for enforcement, but I'm not for trampling basic rights. And Americans have an internal barometer for what looks and smells authoritarian. And whether it's shooting someone who's unarmed or pepper spraying kids or picking people up as they walk into Target and checking their papers, that is an internal barometer that we all have. That you have crossed. And we're here today, and all this firestorm is here, not because of people on the ground, but because of your behavior in ICE. And, I think when you extrapolate out and you listen to what the president and his cabinet are saying, I have to ask about our 2026 elections.
Listen.
Okay, the president says we should federalize our elections.
What exactly did you mean when you said that you should nationalize elections, and which 15 states are you talking about?
I want to see elections be honest, and if a state can't run an election, I think the people behind me should do something about it. Because, if you think about it, a state is an agent for the federal government in elections. I don't know why the federal government doesn't do them anyway. But when you see some of these states about how horribly they run their elections, what a disgrace it is, I think the federal government, when you see crooked elections, and we had plenty of them, and by the way, we had them last time, but go to 2020 and look at the facts that are coming out. Rigged, crooked elections. If we have areas, take a look at Detroit, take a look at Pennsylvania, take a look at Philadelphia, you go take a look at Atlanta, look at some of the places that horrible corruption on elections, and the federal government should not allow that. The federal government should get involved. These are agents of the federal government to count the votes. If they can't count the votes legally and honestly, then somebody else should take over.
But the Constitution says it should be states that administer elections, Mr. President. That's what the Constitution
You know what?
says.
They can administer the election, but they have to do it honestly.
The U.S. Constitution was written by our founders to give that power to the states so that we would never have a president who took too much power and tried to become a king. He's tried to get voter rolls, including in my state. He's complained that elections aren't free and fair. In 2020, he came up with a playbook to deploy federal law enforcement around polling places. And the White House spokeswoman will not rule that out as of a month and a half ago.
That's illegal.
So I have to ask Mr. Lyons, do you believe that ICE has the authority to be deployed to U.S. polling places around the country?
So, ma'am, we're a obviously we do civil enforcement and criminal law enforcement. There's no reason for us to deploy to a polling facility.
So if the president of the United States gets Kristi Noem on the phone and she gets you on the phone and she says, we've heard there's a problem in Georgia or in Michigan or somewhere else, I need you to go and and physically deploy around polling locations, you will say no.
There's no reason for us to deploy, ma'am.
Well, then you should say no, right?
Yes, but just point of clarification. Homeland Security investigations, we do investigate voter fraud, which we've made several arrests, most recently a high-profile one in Massachusetts. So just later on...
That's very different than the physical intimidation.
I just didn't want you to say that we don't do anything with voter. I just want you to know we do that.
That's fine. I'm talking about something that I think would be extraordinary in American history, which is uniformed and masked ICE agents encircling polling places. And it's not fantasy. It's not made up. These are things that the president and his cabinet have suggested.
You're damn right. We're going to have ICE surround the polls come November. We're not going to sit here and allow you to steal the country again. And you can whine and cry and throw your toys out of the pram all you want, but we will never again allow an election to be stolen.
We've suggested invoking the Insurrection Act, which would allow active duty military to do the very same thing.
No,
so this isn't, someone who thinks the sky is falling. The president and his cabinet are suggesting. So you're going to be the guy standing in the breach.
There's no reason, like I said, ma'am, there's no reason for you to use ICE officers in that.
Great. Well, I hope that in the privacy of that meeting, when that comes down and the president feels like he's going to lose the midterm elections, that you don't buckle. Because I think our democracy literally is dependent on it. Mm-hmm. Now, coupled with that, you've heard from a number of my colleagues about labeling people as domestic terrorists. What is the definition of a domestic terrorist?
So, ma'am, domestic terrorist is any organization that, on American soil, home nation soil, that's involved in acts of treason, acts of violence, active extremism against a group or against a country.
Okay, so actually in law, it's defined by the Patriot Act. That's the clearest place we have it. And it has to be tied to criminal activity, right? So protesting, even if you don't like it, protesting of ICE agents, unarmed and without destroying property, is that a domestic terrorist?
No, ma'am. I stated under oath earlier that that's covered under the First Amendment right.
Great. So when, again, the president and Stephen Miller and others in the cabinet, including your boss, Kristi Noem, label people like Renee Good domestic terrorists, you understand why we can't trust what you're doing with the information you're collecting on these so-called domestic terrorists.
It's like a situation where an individual arrived at this scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement.
You just made claims that the individual posed a threat to law enforcement.
That is no claim. It is the facts. The facts of the situation. This individual showed up to a law enforcement operation with a weapon and dozens of rounds of ammunition. He wasn't there to peacefully protest. He was there to perpetuate violence. And he was asked to show up and to continue to resist by a governor who's irresponsible and has a long history of corruption and lying.
The White House has labeled the man who was killed in Minnesota as a domestic terrorist. Is that something you agree with? And have you seen any evidence to back up that claim?
When you perpetuate violence against a government because of ideological reasons and for reasons to resist and perpetuate violence, that is the definition of domestic terrorism. This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts. We are focused specifically on child pedophiles and sexual assault and trafficking rings in Minneapolis, have brought dozens and dozens of them to justice. Why is he protecting them and refusing to work with us? This individual impeded the law enforcement officers and attacked them. State the facts as they unfolded on the street today. We were doing a targeted operation against an illegal criminal, and this individual came with a weapon and dozens of rounds of ammunition and attacked them. And these agents took action to defend their lives and to defend the lives of the people around them and acted according to their training. And we will continue to let this process go forward and not allow people like Governor Walz and Mayor Frey to lie about what actually unfolded on that street. It appears that they want this lawlessness to continue. It appears that they want chaos to distract from the theft and the fraud and the corruption of their city.
Is the president closer to invoking the Insurrection Act?
The president will use every tool that he needs to follow through on his promises to the American people.
Apologize to the family of Alex Preddy.
For what?
for labeling him an assassin with ill intent.
Well, again, I just described to you what I said about Alex Preddy, which is that he's a guy who showed up with ill intent to an ICE protest.
No, but if it is determined, if it's determined that his civil rights were violated by this FBI investigation, will you apologize to that?
So, if this hypothetical leads to that hypothetical leads to another hypothetical,
it's a real case.
Will I do a thing?
So can you tell us under oath, does the Department of Homeland Security maintain a database of any kind of domestic terrorists? Are you collecting facial recognition information, license plates, locations, addresses, those kinds of information?
No, ma'am, and I testified on the oath on Tuesday as well. I said the same thing. We don't have a database. If there is a case, a criminal case, that may involve some type of domestic terrorist organization, Homeland Security, as you know, Homeland Security investigation is involved across the board and embedded with the Joint Terrorism Task Force. We do conduct those, but there is no database, ma'am, for that.
Okay, or do you contribute data to anyone else's, any other federal agency's database?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so the fact that we have ICE agents saying out loud to people that they're trying to arrest or engage with that we're going to put you into a database is just erroneous. They're making that up.
Yes, ma'am, I can't speak to why that officer said it, but we do not do that.
In South Portland, Maine last month?
Because we have a nice little database.
Oh, good.
And now you're considered a domestic terrorist. We have a nice little database.
Oh, good.
And now you're considered a domestic terrorist.
Well, I would just offer that given that the president put out an executive order in September and said he wants a list of domestic terrorist groups to use the full weight of the federal government to go against, you can imagine that people who are peaceful protesters feel like they are going to be targeted and feel that they are at risk. So I think the conduct of your agency has put us in a position where the average American doesn't know whether to trust law enforcement, and that is terrible and scary, given what law enforcement on the ground in our states do. And I would just say, if we do not have serious reform and change, then you will be contributing to the average American who woke up very supportive of law enforcement, being terrified that they and their community
I am absolutely going to give Elissa Slotkin all of the credit for that line of questioning. That was really important, and it was important to get Todd Lyons under oath stating that there's no reason for ICE to be at the polls. It's against the Constitution. By the way, it's illegal for federal agents or a violent masked lawless paramilitary masquerading as legitimate law enforcement to be intimidating voters at the polls. There's no place for that under constitutional or state law anywhere. I also really appreciated the fact that she pointed out that Kristi Noem, Stephen Miller, J.D. Vance all called Alex Preddy and Renee Good domestic terrorists, attempted assassins, violent extremists. Likewise, I'm going to talk about this in the next video. One of the immigrants in Minnesota that was shot in the leg, they originally said that he was attacking federal agents with a shovel and they shot in self-defense. Guess what? The charges against him have been dropped. The agent who shot him has been placed on leave, and there's now an investigation for misconduct. You cannot believe a word that comes out of the mouth of this regime. They will lie about the people that they are brutalizing, victimizing, murdering in the street. And I also really appreciated that Senator Slotkin pointed to the fact that ICE agents are repeatedly intimidating, following people home, looking up people's home addresses, following them home or meeting them at their home to intimidate them, that they are taking pictures of them. They're saying, we're scanning you for facial recognition and we're putting you into the database over and over. Go on Instagram Reels for 2 seconds and you will see so many videos of ICE agents saying, got your photo for the database. You're in the database now. This is a way to intimidate people. This is absolutely about intimidation. Legitimate law enforcement does not need to intimidate American citizens exercising their protected First Amendment rights. And yet we are seeing ICE goons doing this over and over because they are not legitimate law enforcement. They are violating the law. They are criminals on our streets, violating our rights on a regular basis. And there is no excuse for their behavior. There's no justification for it. And I think Senator Slotkin was absolutely correct in saying that it's pissing off Americans all over the country, no matter what their political persuasion. More Americans now support abolishing ICE altogether than support maintaining it. The more we see ICE harming our communities, infringing upon our rights, murdering American citizens, the more people are like this, And I do think that Senator Slotkin is correct in that we do have kind of an internal, like, right, we have that sense of like, this is authoritarian shit. I'm not down with this. I think a lot of conservative Americans will accept a lot of oppression, especially if they were raised with authoritarian parenting, right? They were raised to obey all figures in authority, all adults in authority. But there's a line at which it's like, are you fucking kidding me? This goon has a right. I'm like just driving through my neighborhood and somebody in law enforcement looks at my address and follows me home and comes out and like films me and says that they can do whatever they want to me. We're seeing people have their Fourth Amendment rights violated. Very, very basic right in the United States. ICE thinks that they don't have to have a search warrant to bust into your home, your sanctuary, your home. We're seeing ICE agents abducting people out of hospitals. We're seeing ICE agents abducting families as they are going to school. We're seeing American citizens consistently intimidated by masked men who do not know the law and will just spew absolute bullshit. And we are seeing the leaders of these agencies just lying through their fucking teeth over and over and over.
Thanks, Caroline. To follow on Gabe's question, Secretary Noem said Alex Preddy committed an act of domestic terrorism. Stephen Miller labeled Preddy a domestic terrorist. Does the president agree with them?
Look, as I've said, I have not heard the president characterize Mr. Preddy in that way. However, I have heard the president say he wants to let the facts in the investigation lead itself.
Was he alarmed to hear his top officials referring to him in that way, rushing to that judgment?
Danny, go ahead.
Yelling at ICE officers or Border Patrol, is that a form of domestic assault on the officers?
No, sir.
Mr. Lyons?
No, sir, it's not.
And is filming of ICE or Border Patrol either an assault or a crime in any way, Mr. Scott?
No, sir.
Mr. Lyons?
No, sir.
Now, I get that Elissa Slotkin, former CIA agent, is far more worried about the erosion of public trust in law enforcement. I don't fucking trust law enforcement. They're there to reinforce the system, to protect property, not to protect people. And we're sort of seeing like how true that is now. They're there to protect the system. And more conservative Americans, like Senator Slotkin, are far more worried about the erosion of public trust in law enforcement. That really matters to her. She believes that there are good people in law enforcement. She believes in a strong border, and she believes that we need ICE agents to apprehend legitimate criminals who are coming across the border into our country. And so she's more concerned that now it has reached a point. Obviously, it's reached a point. Obviously, it's reached a tipping point now, right? Where you have more Americans wanting ICE abolished than maintaining it. There is no coming back from the way that Todd Lyons and Kristi Noem have and the actions of immigration and customs enforcement agents themselves, right? These are the guys who are supposed to be making sure that you don't bring a carton of cigarettes in from across the border, right? These guys are now shooting Americans in the streets. These guys are violating your rights. These guys are beating American citizens. And in case after case after case after case, they are trumping up charges against people that are immediately dropped in court. They are lying through their fucking teeth. There is no way. If you're average American, your average conservative white American who previously thought like ACAB is ridiculous and there are good cops and ICE does a good and necessary job. All trust in that has been completely eroded. And it's just going to get worse for ICE. It's just going to get worse. And I hope so. I think that ICE needs to be completely abolished and DHS completely dismantled. These institutions are only 23 years old. We don't need to have them. So now we have today Kristi Noem getting to the heart of it, right? Just saying the quiet part out loud. I know that if she speaks, usually if her lips are moving, she's lying, but she wasn't fucking hiding her intentions and Donald Trump's intentions, talking about the fact that they want the right people to vote.
One of those critical infrastructure responsibilities that I have as well. And I would say that many people believe that it may be one of the most important things that we need to make sure we trust is reliable, and that when it gets to election day that we've been proactive to make sure that we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders to lead this country through the days that we have, knowing that people can trust it.
Right? They don't want free and fair elections where every American citizen expresses their constitutional right to vote, gets to cast their vote. We live in a representative democracy where you deserve to have representation in government. Your share of power is loaned to your elected representative to govern on your behalf. They only want the people who will vote to keep them in power to be able to vote, and they want to prevent everybody else from voting. That's not a democracy. That's not a democracy. That is a tin pot dictatorship, right? Kristi Noem is not fucking hiding it. Donald Trump is not hiding it. He's desperate to cancel vote by mail. He's desperate to interfere with the midterms. He's desperate to intimidate people from coming out to vote. And I'm sure after Republicans lose, fascist Republicans lose in a fucking landslide, they're going to try and prevent duly elected representatives from being sworn in. There's going to be a lot of shit between now and the midterms and then in the months after. And we all have to be prepared for that. I know that Todd Lyons said that ICE will not, there's no reason for ICE to be used at the polls. Cool. Under oath, he's not willing to say that ICE can do something illegal, right? He's basically like, I'm not going to be the fall guy for this. They're setting Kristi Noem up to be the fall guy for that. But all of this intimidation, they fully intend to do. They're going to do all of it. And we need to be prepared to stand up and be strong. And we have been very complacent about our right to vote and what that means to exercise it. In other countries, people will make really, really big sacrifices. Black Americans throughout our history have made really big sacrifices in order to be able to exercise their right to vote. It is a privilege, but it is also our civic duty as Americans to get our asses to the polls and to vote. Because the way that we overcome all of this, massive voter turnout, and then we need to be prepared to defend the results of free and fair elections, defend the results of the elections after Donald Trump and whoever his fascist crony Republicans who are willing to stand behind him as the republic crumbles and Donald Trump makes it very clear he wants to be a dictator. Whatever Republicans are standing behind him, we all understand what they are, right? We all understand that they are collaborators in the destruction of democracy. If they try and make sure that duly elected representatives are not allowed to be seated by force or through whatever other shenanigans, we all have to be in the streets in the millions to defend our rights and to defend the results of the election. That's what worked in Chile. That's what worked in Serbia. That has worked in so many other countries where non-violent, successful resistance, but also deposing of an autocrat has happened through elections and then defending the results of those elections. So I hope we're all on the same page here. I hope we're all on the same page here. And thank you to Elissa Slotkin for being honest about what happened.